Good morning and welcome to IG's early morning call on Wednesday, the 24th of January. I'm Angela Barnes. Coming up on today's programme, Japan trade balance. Well, exports rose to a record in December, leading to an unexpected trade surplus. And the Bank of Canada rate decision is due today. The overnight rate is forecast to remain at a 22-year high as CPI accelerated in December. And in US earnings, Netflix shares jumped as subscriber ads beat estimates. Well, Tesla is due to report later. Well, let's start by taking a look at volatility this morning because the VIX has been lower since Thursday and is currently down on the day, minus 0.85%, back around where it was on the 14th of December. Well, this comes as the S&P 500 closed at a record high for the third session in a row. Well, 30 minutes to go until European markets open. Let's have a look at how the pre-market is looking. Well, the FTSE 100 is set for a higher open, up 0.25%. France's CAC 40 as well, also set for a higher open, up 0.49%. And Germany's DAX also higher, up 0.71% as well. Well, the FTSE and European stocks were mixed on Tuesday, with London losing its earlier boost from lower than expected UK government borrowing figures that fueled hopes of tax cuts for consumers. Well, today, investors will be keeping across UK and Eurozone PMI flash data for the latest economic health indicators. And there's more earnings as well, including from easyJet and JD Wetherspoon. Well, let's have a look at things overnight in the Asia Pacific markets as well. Well, the Nikkei 225 closed down 0.80%. The Hang Seng in Hong Kong up nearly 2% there, and Australia's S&P ASX 200 also marginally higher, just up 0.06%. Well, Hong Kong's Hang Seng index surged again there. You can see nearly 2%. That was powered by tech stocks, as other regional markets mostly fell, though Alibaba helped lift that index up. Now, Chinese stocks as well struggled yesterday. Speculation of a huge rescue package from Beijing underwhelmed investors worried about the shaky economy. Well, let's have a look at Wall Street and see how that closed overnight. Okay, only yesterday afternoon, of course, in the US, but equity markets. So Dow Jones Industrial Average down 0.25%, the S&P 500 up 0.29%, and the Nasdaq Composite also closed higher, up 0.43%. Well, the S&P, as earlier noted, gained to set a fresh all-time high as traders assess the latest batch of corporate earnings, and we'll have more on the latest shortly. Meanwhile, eBay announced that it plans to lay off 9% of its workforce. That's the equivalent of about 1,000 full-time jobs. However, its stock is up about 4% this morning on the IG platform, the all-session stock. That's pre-market in the US before Wall Street opens. Meanwhile, the markets will be paying close attention today to, as well, of course, there's also to note, the election build-up. Former President Donald Trump won the New Hampshire Republican primary, and of course the markets will be paying close attention to those election updates and how and who comes potentially into power will impact the markets. Well, let's have a look at how Wall Street is looking today. Let's have a look at the US 500, the S&P pre-market set for a higher open again, up 0.34%. And the tech-heavy Nasdaq is once again set for a higher open this morning, up 0.56%. And the Dow Jones too, also marginally higher, they're up 0.11%. Well, manufacturing PMI data, crude oil inventories, and more earnings will be on the radar of investors. Tesla and IBM are among them. More on those in a moment. But let's talk about Japan, because exports rose to a record high in December, which led to an unexpected trade surplus of 62.1 billion yen. While economists had anticipated a deficit of 122.1 billion yen. Well, exports rose 9.8% year over year, beating a consensus estimate of 9.1%. Shipments to the US surged as well to their strongest ever level, rising by 20.4%. That was led by shipments of cars and auto parts, and marking 27 consecutive months of growth. Well, exports to China, Japan's biggest trading partner, climbed 9.6%, boosted by shipments of semiconductor, manufacturing equipment and cars. Japan's imports fell 6.8%, more than the median estimate for a 5.3% decrease. For the whole of 2023, Japan logged a trade deficit of 9.29 trillion yen, marking a third consecutive year of deficit. Well, if we look at Japan's Nikkei 225 index here, we can see that it's currently up marginally 0.3%. It's been on an upward trajectory since October last year, setting a new record in almost 34 years. That was the beginning of January. But its share value is down. Well, it was down this morning. Obviously, it's regained value again there as traders also weigh the latest communication from Japan's central bank as well on Tuesday, with the bank leaving monetary policy unchanged. And then if we just switch over to the US dollar, Japanese yen price chart here as well, and let's have a look, because if we look at that, well, the pair is down on the day, 0.36%, hovering around 147 to 148, that familiar level. Markets picked up the US dollar yesterday, keeping the yen broadly lower. Traders will now be digesting the latest PMI data before today's US session begins. Now, a whole raft of PMI data is out today. Manufacturing services flash PMI will be released around the world throughout the day. In Japan, Jiban Bank manufacturing PMI remained in contraction territory as expected, while services activity expanded at a faster pace. Apart from services activity in the UK and US, every reading is expected to remain below 50 in January. Well, if we look at the US dollar price chart here, let me just pull that up for you. The US dollar basket this morning. Well, let's see how it's doing against its peers. Well, it's currently down 0.18%. Currently, so it's hovering around that 102, 103 level. Market sentiment suggests a decreased likelihood of a rate cut by the Fed in March. The latest PMI data could prove to be another pivot point for the US dollar. Moving on, at 3 p.m. this afternoon, it's the Bank of Canada's turn to release its latest interest rate decision. Economists believe the bank will keep its overnight rate at 5%, leaving borrowing costs at 22-year high. Well, latest data showed headline CPI growth accelerating to 3.4% in December from 3.1% the previous month, which would make it very difficult for the bank to turn dovish. At the same time, the Canadian economy feels the high interest rate in Q3 GDP contracted by 0.3% quarter over quarter. Economists predict that inflation will eventually return to a target rate of 2% by 2025. In the meantime, inflation is expected to be a bit higher at around 3.5% until mid-2024. Now, let's have a quick look at the US dollar, Canadian dollar price chart. It's marginally higher. Well, it was marginally higher this morning. It's now down minus 0.05%. The rate decision and today's PMI data will be the pivot points for the pair today. Well, let's give you a few corporate updates, because we've had a trading statement update from easyJet this morning, and it's reported a narrower first quarter headline loss before tax of £126 million compared with the loss of £133 million a year ago. Well, the number of passengers rose 14% year over year. The load factor came in at 86%. Well, also this morning, watch out for ASML holding shares at their open in Amsterdam, because Europe's biggest tech company on Wednesday reported better than expected net profit in sales in Q4, helped by booming sales to China. Well, net profit rose 9% to 2.5 billion euros on sales of 7.2 billion euros, beating analysts' expectations of a 1.87 billion euro net profit on revenue of 6.9 billion euros. Now let's talk about Netflix, because its shares jumped in after hours trading as investors were surprisingly pleased by the number of new subscribers. Well, the company said it added 13.1 million in the December quarter, its largest ever fourth quarter subscriber growth, while handily exceeding projected gains of 8.97 million. Well, that brings the total number of subscribers to 260 million. Well, the market didn't really care that Netflix earnings per share of $2.21 fell short of estimates. Revenue rose to $8.83 billion, topping forecasts and the company's own guidance of $8.71 billion. Well, Netflix expects a double-digit revenue growth for its full year 2024. And during a Netflix conference call, its CFO, Spencer Newman, said the group plans to increase spending on content. The streamer will invest as much as $17 billion this year. While Netflix will also continue to experiment earlier on Tuesday, it announced its first ever live event deal with the arrival in January of WWE Raw. And let's just move over to Netflix's price chart as well, because it's an all-session stock on the IG platform, currently up 10.11% before Wall Street opens this afternoon. Well, its shares were up 8.3 after hours, now up 10.1. The stock has gained 65% so far during 2023. Well, moving on. At lunchtime, the street expects AT&T to post earnings of 56 cents per share on revenue of $31.47 billion. In the past few days, AT&T made the news alongside Alphabet's Google and Vodafone. The three groups have announced strategic investment in AST Space Mobile. Well, Space Mobile is a company that is building the first space-based cellular broadband network accessible directly by everyday smartphones. So in clearer terms, you'd never be without coverage anymore. So we'll be keeping across at that. And then also Tesla. Well, Tesla will update the market with its report for the fourth quarter after the US closing bell tonight. Analysts anticipate earnings of 72 cents per share. Revenue is seen at $25.52 billion. Once again, one key metric for investors is margins. Throughout the year, Tesla has been cutting its vehicle prices, focusing, as Elon Musk pledges about 12 months ago, on sales rather than margins. Well, automotive gross margins topped in Q1 at 30%. They were down at 16.3% in Q3 and are likely to slip again. Tesla should also communicate its guidance for 2024. Well, Tesla's share price is on the up today. It's currently up 0.64% on the day. Year to date, it's down, however, about 16%, but over the last year, it has gained nearly 50%, roughly. Well, also due tonight is IBM. Well, the group is expected to post quarterly earnings of $3.77 per share, 4.2% year over year. Revenue is also forecast to rise by about 3% to $17.23 billion. Up to now, AI has made a very modest contribution to IBM revenue. Even though it's still early days, the markets want to know more about IBM AI plans, especially how it will differentiate itself from its competitors. And then just pulling up the IBM price chart for you, well, the company's share price has gained about 27% over the last year and is up pre-market 1.24%. Now let's have a quick look at commodities before we go and see how Brent is doing this morning to start. It's currently up 0.42% at $79 a barrel roughly. And then if we move over to US crude, otherwise known as WTI, that too is up this morning in the green, 0.44%, trading around $74 a barrel as well. Well, crude oil inventories fell by 6.7 million barrels last week, according to the American Petroleum Institute. Gasoline stockpiles also rose by 7.2 million, while distillate inventories fell by 245,000 barrels. Well, that's all we've got time for this morning on Early Morning Call. Do tune in for our afternoon show, Beat the Street, ahead of the Wall Street Open. Thank you for watching.